Snow fell over Frost Hollow territory in thick, silent sheets, blanketing the pine forest until every path looked the same. Alpha King Draven Ashgard rode ahead of his patrol, his breath fogging in the freezing air, his senses sharp despite the cold. He had ruled the northern packs for 6 years, and in that time he had learned to trust his instincts above almost anything else. Tonight, something felt different. Something pulled at him, faint but insistent, like a thread tugging at the edge of his awareness. He raised a hand, signaling his men to halt. "Do you hear that?" he asked quietly. The warriors around him exchanged uncertain glances. The wind was howling through the trees, and the snow made every sound seem far away. But Draven heard it clearly now, a soft, broken sound, almost swallowed by the storm. Someone was crying. He dismounted without another word and walked into the trees, following the sound as it grew louder. His men called after him, but he did not stop. Something in his chest had come alive, a pull he had never felt before, and he could not ignore it even if he wanted to. At the edge of a frozen creek, half buried in snow, he found her. A young woman sat curled against a fallen tree, her knees pulled to her chest, shivering so hard her whole body shook. Her hair was dusted white with snow, and her lips had turned a pale shade of blue. She was crying, silent sobs that shook her shoulders, and in her arms she held something close to her chest, guarding it as though her life depended on it. The moment Draven's eyes met hers, something inside him shifted. It was as if the entire world had gone quiet, and only she remained. His wolf stirred within him, a deep and certain recognition rising to the surface. Mate. The word echoed through his mind, undeniable and absolute. "You're freezing," he said gently, kneeling beside her. "Let me help you." The woman flinched back from him, curling tighter around whatever she held. Fear flashed across her face, sharp and immediate. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking, "please don't take it from me." "Take what?" Draven asked, careful to keep his voice soft. "I only want to help you. You'll freeze out here." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face, but she did not answer. Draven could see she was too cold to argue much longer, her lips trembling as much from exhaustion as from fear. He made a decision. Slowly, so as not to startle her, he removed his heavy fur cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders. "My name is Draven," he said. "I am not going to hurt you, but I cannot leave you out here to freeze. Will you let me carry you back to the stronghold?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, exhausted and shaking, she gave the smallest nod. Draven lifted her carefully into his arms, careful not to jostle whatever she held so protectively against her chest. As he carried her through the snow, he caught her scent for the first time, wildflowers and pine, achingly familiar, despite the fact that they had never met. It was the scent of his mate. Back at the stronghold, the healers tended to her, while Draven paced outside the door, his mind racing. He learned her name was Wren Calloway, an Omega from a smaller pack that had recently been absorbed into Frost Hollow territory after their previous Alpha lost a hostile dispute with a rival pack. Many of the Omegas from that pack had arrived quiet and withdrawn, carrying the weight of whatever they had endured before the merger. Wren, it seemed, carried more than most. Over the following days, Draven noticed how careful Wren was with everyone around her. She flinched at raised voices, kept her eyes down when addressed by higher-ranking wolves, and slipped away whenever she thought no one was watching. She never let her guard down, she never let anyone near her belongings, and she always seemed to be watching the tree line beyond the stronghold walls with quiet, anxious eyes. The pack began to whisper. Some called her strange, others thought she was hiding something dangerous. Draven silenced every rumor with a single look, but privately he wondered too. What had she been protecting out there in the snow? Why did she disappear into the forest late at night, only to return hours later, exhausted and secretive? He asked her once, gently, over a quiet dinner in his private hall. Wren's hands had tightened around her cup, her knuckles turning white, and she had simply said, "It is mine to protect. Please do not ask me again." Draven had respected the request, though it cost him more than he expected to let the question go unanswered. Every instinct in him wanted to know, to understand the woman the bond had chosen for him. But he reminded himself, again and again, that trust could not be forced. It had to be given freely, in its own time. He could have ordered her watched. He could have demanded answers, using his authority as Alpha King to force the truth from her. But something told him that fear had already ruled Ren's life long enough. If he wanted her trust, if he wanted his mate, he would have to earn it, not command it. So Draven chose patience. He began leaving warm meals outside her door when she skipped the dining hall, never mentioning it, never making her feel watched. When a warrior mocked her Omega status within earshot, Draven corrected him sharply in front of the entire hall, making it clear that no one under his rule would be treated as lesser. When nightmares woke her in the night, and her cries carried faintly through the stone corridors, he would sit outside her door, not speaking, simply present, until her breathing calmed. Slowly, so slowly he almost didn't notice it happening, Ren began to soften around him. She started meeting his eyes when he spoke to her. She lingered a little longer in his presence, instead of retreating to her room. One evening, she even smiled at something he said, small and fleeting, but real. Draven found himself thinking of that smile long after she had gone. Still she disappeared at night. Still she guarded her secret. One cold evening, nearly a month after he had found her in the snow, Draven noticed Ren slip out of the stronghold once again, wrapped tightly in a dark cloak. This time, instead of waiting for her to return, he followed. She moved carefully through the trees, clearly familiar with the path despite the darkness. Draven kept his distance, using every skill of stealth his years as Alpha had taught him. Eventually, she stopped at a small, hidden den tucked beneath the roots of an old oak tree, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. Draven watched from the shadows as Ren knelt at the entrance and pulled out a small bundle of blankets. From within, a tiny sound emerged, a whimper, high and weak. Ren gently lifted the bundle into her arms, and Draven's breath caught as he finally understood. It was a wolf pup, small, thin, with one leg twisted unnaturally beneath it. Ren cradled the pup close, murmuring soft, soothing words as she fed it from a small pouch of warmed milk she had carried from the stronghold kitchens. Draven stepped out from the trees. Ren startled, nearly dropping the pup, before pulling it protectively against her chest, just as she had done the night he found her. Her eyes were wide with terror, glistening with fresh tears. "Please," she whispered, "please don't take her. Please don't hurt her." "Ren," Draven said gently, kneeling down slowly so as not to frighten her further. "I would never hurt an innocent pup. Tell me what's happening, please." Ren's shoulders shook as the tears finally broke free, the dam she had held for so long finally giving way. "In my old pack," she said, her voice trembling, "pups born with any weakness or deformity were not allowed to live. It was tradition, passed down for generations. They said it kept the pack strong. I found her abandoned in the birthing den 3 weeks before the takeover. I couldn't let them take her, I couldn't." She looked down at the small pup in her arms, its twisted leg pressed gently against her wrist. "When we came here, I was afraid all over again. I didn't know your laws. I didn't know if you would allow her to live, or if you would see her as weak, like they did. I couldn't risk losing her. She's the only thing I saved." Draven felt something in his chest tighten painfully at her words. This was the secret she had guarded so fiercely, the reason for her sleepless nights and her frightened eyes. Not danger, not deceit, love, and fear of losing the one small life she had managed to protect. He thought of the nights he had sat outside her door, listening to her muffled cries, believing she was haunted only by memories. Now he understood there had been 2 burdens weighing on her all along, the pain of what she had survived, and the constant, exhausting fear of being discovered. She had carried both alone, trusting no one enough to share the weight, not even the mate the bond had given her. It made him ache for every night she had slipped through the cold forest by herself, terrified that a single mistake would cost the pup its life. "You should have told me sooner," he said quietly, though there was no blame in his voice, only regret that she had suffered so long in silence. "I wanted to," Ren admitted, "but hope is a dangerous thing where I come from. I learned it was safer not to expect kindness, so it could not be taken away from me again." Draven reached out and gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Then let me be the first exception," he said. "Let me show you that hope does not always end in loss." "Wren," he said softly, reaching out to gently touch her hand. "No pup will be harmed under my rule for something as meaningless as a twisted leg. I promise you that." For the first time since he had found her, Wren looked at him without fear, only cautious, fragile hope. But word of the pup did not stay hidden for long. Within days, Draven's uncle, an elder of the pack who still clung tightly to the old ways, discovered the truth. He stormed into the great hall during the evening meal, demanding that the pup be removed and dealt with according to ancient pack law, a law that still technically remained on the books, though Draven had never enforced it during his rule. "It is tradition," his uncle insisted, his voice carrying through the hall. "A weak pup weakens the pack. This has always been our way." Wren stood frozen at the edge of the hall, the pup hidden behind her, tears already gathering in her eyes as every face turned toward her. Draven could see the fear returning, the same fear he had found her drowning in on that snowy night. He rose slowly from his seat at the head of the hall, his presence commanding immediate silence. "Tradition," Draven said, his voice steady and clear, "is not the same as truth. And cruelty, dressed as tradition, is still cruelty." He turned to face the gathered pack, his eyes finally settling on Wren, standing brave despite her trembling hands. "From this day forward, no pup born into this pack, or brought into this pack, will be harmed for any weakness of body. Strength is not measured by a leg, or an ear, or a tail. It is measured by the courage to protect what is right, even when it is difficult." He crossed the hall and stood beside Wren, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This pup is under my protection, as her guardian is under my protection. Wren Calloway is my mate, and she will stand beside me as Luna of Frost Hollow." Gasps rippled through the hall, but no one dared challenge him further. His uncle, though clearly displeased, said nothing more, bowing his head in reluctant acceptance of his alpha's decree. That night, after the hall had emptied and the pack had returned to their homes buzzing with the news, Draven found Wren sitting by the fire in his chambers, the pup curled asleep in her lap. He sat beside her quietly, giving her space to speak when she was ready. "I was so afraid," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just of losing her. I was afraid of trusting anyone again. Where I came from, kindness was rare, and it never lasted. It will last here," Draven promised. "I know trust is not something I can demand from you, but I will spend every day proving that you and this pup are safe with me, for as long as it takes." Wren looked up at him, her eyes soft in the firelight, free of the fear that had shadowed them since the night he found her. "I think," she said quietly, "it might not take as long as I thought." Weeks later, as the first signs of spring began to melt the heavy snow from the mountains, the pack gathered outside the stronghold to witness the mating ceremony of Alpha King Draven Ashgard and his chosen Luna, Wren Calloway. She stood before him in simple furs, her hair braided with winter flowers, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. At her feet, the small pup, now stronger and steadier despite her twisted leg, wagged her tail happily, watched over by the entire pack she had once feared would reject her. As Draven took Wren's hands in his own, he understood that the secret she had guarded so desperately in the snow was never something to fear. It was the very thing that proved she was exactly the mate he needed, someone whose heart was gentle enough to protect the weak, and strong enough to fight for them, no matter the cost. And as the pack howled together beneath the clearing winter sky, Frost Hollow began a new chapter, one built not on old cruelty, but on the courage of a young Omega who had once cried alone in the snow. The pup, now given the name Snowdrop by the children of the pack, grew stronger with each passing season, her twisted leg never once slowing her joyful, clumsy runs across the training yard. Wren watched her from the steps of the stronghold, Draven's arm warm around her shoulders, and felt, for the first time in her life, that the future did not need to be feared. It could simply be lived, one gentle day at a time.